Garrett Ian is with us from freeconquer.org, live from Chicago at the NATO protest. Garrett, are you there?
I am here. How's it going, guys?
Hey, welcome to Free Talk Live. You've been there on the ground at the NATO protest for the last couple days, and we haven't really even talked about it. Mark, I don't know if you discussed it Sunday night, but we didn't talk about it last night.
Not
so
much.
So I wanted Garrett to call in as somebody who's been in the thick of things down there. And Garrett, can you stick with us and give us some details here in a few moments?
Definitely.
All right, more with Garrett Ian from freeconquer.org. He is there in Chicago, and it's been pretty crazy from what I understand. 855-450-FREE. You can take control of the airwaves. Bring up anything. Free Talk Live. Well, let's talk more about what's been going on, but first get a report from somebody who's on the ground, Garrett Ian from freeconquer.org. Garrett, you've been there for a couple days. When did you arrive in Chicago?
I arrived with a group of people from mostly Occupy New Hampshire and Occupy Boston on Friday morning, and immediate presence was felt by the federal authorities once we landed. In fact, when we were getting our subway tickets out of the airport, a Homeland Security guy with a cup of coffee came over, and he was very nice and asked if we needed directions and led us to where we were going.
Where were you going?
Well, the group had a church that they were able to stay in.
Okay.
I knew somebody who was getting a hotel in the area that I was able to use to offload a lot of the video I was getting during the day and recharge all my batteries. So anybody that was in the certain area that the NATO protest was actually going down was subject to pretty much search. The subway lines that ran through there had TSA-level security, which I actually never took, so I didn't get to experience, because I didn't want to experience. But so mostly we were staying, and most of the protests were going on a few blocks north of where the actual NATO summit was. And anywhere that you went in Chicago, and it was very expansive, police presence was heavily felt. If you were downtown, there was probably 6 or 7 officers on any end of the corner. And if you were far outside of town, you were still seeing a police officer on just about any corner or somewhere around you.
Wow, it sounds like the police presence in Keene today was light in comparison to that. That's really that does sound intense. So, were you around with any of these protests going down that people have been hearing about online?
Well, from what I understand, the most brutal crackdown that occurred over the weekend was on Sunday, when the Black Bloc tried to march towards the NATO protest. Sunday was the day that there was actually a permit given to actually march through the area that the NATO summit was going on. I believe we actually passed it on the march, and the march was led by Iraq Veterans Against the War and some Afghan war veterans who discarded their medals at a ceremony on Sunday.
Yeah.
And the way the permit was organized by the city was that once that event had ended, everyone was to be led west away from where the summit was. And there were people who had decided in advance that they were going to, at that time, advance through the lines and towards the NATO summit. So I decided at that point I had only one battery left for my camera. I didn't really want to get in the thick of things when it seemed that things were definitely going to be going down. So me and some other people held up in a park, which was surrounded by, I'd say, about 200 officers in full riot gear that just stayed outside of this park and let people stay in there without any hassle. We could hear in the distance the LRADs that were calling out to people, giving out some sort of generic message that they had to disperse to the west.
What's an LRAD?
And, the LRAD, the long-range acoustic device, which is one of the many new military toys that they've brought out for the NATO summit.
Yeah, I hear there's drones flying over. Have you seen any?
There was helicopters flying overhead at any given time. The most I counted at once was 4.
Wow.
There was usually at least 1 or 2 visible downtown. And anytime you needed to know where most of the action was, you just needed to look up and see where the hovering helicopters were.
What? It's funny. On the ground intel. What? These LRADs, what were they mounted on?
Well, after the ceremony was over, before the Black Bloc March attempted to get to the NATO summit, I saw the LRAD go by in the direction that was going on, and they had it on top of a van. But a friend of mine who was also filming there and gave me some of his footage got a video from a different area in which they had the LRAD mounted on top of a Bearcat.
Of course.
Behind this chain link fence.
Yeah, I've seen on Bearcats in Pittsburgh, they had them on like SWAT vans, like the team bails out the back.
Now, I thought the LRAD was something with like a really high-pitched tone of some sort that they're shooting out at people. You're saying they're just using it to announce things verbally?
They can use it for both. It's also a very, very effective long-range communications device. They could project sound clear across a field
Gotcha.
for people to hear.
Wow, so creepy. I mean, the whole situation. What's the feeling like down there? Is there a lot of excitement? Is there a lot of fear? I mean, what's it like?
Chicago was, for the most part, a ghost town as far as locals just walking around went.
Mm-hmm.
When you saw people, it was usually if they were up in a balcony taking video, and it seemed very uncomfortable for them. I talked to some people on the subways mostly, and they said they were avoiding the downtown area for the weekend if they didn't have business there.
I'll bet.
Is this over now? I mean, how long does this NATO thing go for?
Yes, Monday was the last day. It was technically the NATO Summit was Sunday and Monday, but I believe there were still a lot of diplomats in town all over the weekend.
Garrett, do you have more that you want to tell us? If so, you're welcome to stick with us.
Okay.
All right, hang on. More with Garrett Ian from freeconcord.org. They're in Chicago for the aftermath of the NATO Summit. It's Free Talk Live. We've been talking with Garrett Ian. He is one of the bloggers over at freekeen.com, but he's originally over at freeconcord.org. That's where he posts his stuff first. And we're fortunate enough at freekeen.com that he also posts his stuff over at Free Keen, which he does some really great work. He's based out of Concord, so he's a really busy activist. There's always something to cover going on in Concord. Of course, all of us are here, the three of us in the studio. Garrett's a New Hampshire native, but the three of us in the studio are here in New Hampshire because of the Free State Project. We're here to get together with other like-minded liberty activists to get active together and to achieve liberty in our lifetime, hopefully. At least that's the intention. We've got over 1,000 people that are here now in New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project, and over 12,000 people have pledged at this point to make the move to New Hampshire. And Garrett, as a New Hampshire native who's lived, I believe, in Concord your whole life, what was it like when you found out that the Free State Project had chosen New Hampshire as its destination?
I believe I became aware of the Free State Project about 2 years after people had already begun moving here. So it was something I slowly became aware of as I was becoming aware of the ideas of liberty in general.
What was it that was, I guess, alerted you to the existence of the Free State Project? Was there one thing in particular that caught your eye?
I'd say it was through contacts with friends who were in other political organizations who were FSP movers or friends of FSP movers. And just getting to know people and interact with people who had more ideas than were necessarily shared in government schools or that one had heard before. That's how I became very much awakened to it.
You actually ended up going down to Florida for a few years and going to school in Sarasota, which is where Mark and I are from. Yeah, he went to New College. And
well, I went to USF, but I spent a lot of time at New College.
I see.
Gotcha. And so, you're kind of
good. That says something about your hygiene that you weren't actually a New College student.
So, but now you're back in New Hampshire, and you started up freeconcord.org a couple years back, and you decided to head out to Chicago for this NATO thing. Now, what inspired the trip in the first place? Because I don't know, I don't want to get anywhere near all those cops. That sounds like a really dangerous situation.
Well, my biggest inspiration was the fact that a free ride was being offered by a nurses union out in Chicago. Pretty much anybody who wanted to come out, it was, even though they had their own rally and it was originally going to be a march and they had their permit yanked by the city, they had a rally in which they called for the taxes be raised on the rich in order to, end, if there was a big tax on the rich, it would end all of the failures of the U.S. economy. And so that was a specific event that was on Friday, but the buses that they brought people out on were made so that they'd arrive Thursday night and that people wouldn't be leaving until Monday afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
So it was for the whole NATO summit that you were able to go if you were able to get on this bus. Our bus broke down, and they didn't get us a bus in time to get there, so they ended up flying us out the next day. So
oh, wow.
Ended up getting free plane tickets out there with about 28 other activists.
Wow.
So is that why you're still out? Are you still in Chicago right now?
No, I safely arrived back in the Shire last evening.
Oh, okay.
Oh, it's quick.
Glad you're back.
Glad we had somebody on the ground.
glad you didn't get arrested.
Make helicopter noises like this.
I didn't realize, Mark. I didn't realize it was over already. I had no idea how long this thing was going. So I'm glad you didn't get arrested throughout that. Was there anything else that you wanted to highlight from your weekend in Chicago and the the police state that was there?
Well, from what I understand, it must have been the most militarized the United States city has ever been. Just from what I could see and from my understanding of other events. Because usually, like at different conventions, there'll be a very, very high presence of police at like the Republican and Democratic conventions. But this was citywide. It seemed like there was a full occupation.
Wow.
Have you ever been to Chicago before?
Nope, never before. So this is my first time there.
Because when I was in Chicago, I've been in and out of there because I came from Wisconsin, just north. So like Union Station, O'Hare, like they're always like major police states. Like I remember sitting in Union Station with like 5 cops to my right and like 2 dogs. And they're both like mad at each other, and like the cops are just standing there, like they don't even care that these dogs are like barking at each other, and they're just sitting there. And I was freaking out kind of because I'm about to get on a train. And
yeah, but it sounds like he's saying they were everywhere across the whole city. I
don't know. I mean, maybe it's. I guarantee it was an increased presence, but Chicago's already a pretty bad police state. I mean, I would consider them in the top 5 worst police, most corrupt, violent police departments in the country. So. They're pretty bad already.
It's very difficult to record there. It's a felony to record someone unless they give you explicit cops specifically, unless they give you explicit permission.
See, that's what I was wondering about.
Now, I've seen some relaxed this week.
Wasn't there something recently though, Mark, about an overturning of that?
Michael Allison is the case that was facing 75 years for that, and 2 judges have ruled that it's unconstitutional, but the law still hasn't been changed. They can still charge people with it, and they probably have every full intention of doing it. I had wondered about that, if this would be the last, hoorah for the eavesdropping or something like that. They don't call it wiretapping in Illinois.
Oh, really?
They call it like the eavesdropping or something like that. And it comes with a much stiffer penalty. And I wondered how many. I haven't heard. I don't have my ear on the internet.
You're facing 3 felony charges for wiretapping here in New Hampshire, but Illinois is worse.
Yeah. That Michael Allison, I think it's like 7 counts, and it was like 75 years. That he was facing for that, and that was on over months. The police kept coming to his house. He kept recording them, and they finally figured out that he always had a recorder in his pocket. So after they'd arrest him for, whatever, they were harassing him basically. But once they'd come to his house, arrest him, they would just tack that on as well because they knew he always had this recorder in his jacket. So a lot of his charges, like, the 4th, 5th, 6th, would definitely be thrown out anyways because the cops already knew that he was recording every other time they had arrested him. So
now, Garrett, you went out there with a bunch of occupiers, and I think it was you and Bill Kostrick. Did he also accompany?
Yeah, he came out in a car with someone else, but we did meet up while he was out there.
So there were at least a few liberty-oriented people who made the trip out there. Was there any good opportunities for outreach at all, or were you pretty much just there to document what you were seeing?
I was there primarily to document. Did have a lot of great conversations with people from all over the country. So I would say that there was in a sense, like when we're talking about recording, it's almost like civil disobedience if you know that you might be able to be arrested for something, even if it is technically constitutional. Another form of civil disobedience I saw over the march was there were some people openly smoking marijuana as we were walking around.
Oh, excellent.
The march. And police weren't intervening as far as like breaking up the crowds to jump in and grab them in those instances. So in the sense that it became such like a police state, it was very much like the we're afraid of terrorism state. It was like the police are all over and you don't touch them, they don't touch you, and you just keep back. If you're recording, they weren't really acknowledging it.
Yeah, there was this video that I was talking about earlier with the guys from wearechange.org. They are clearly recording in this particular video, and the police didn't really seem to be too concerned about that in that moment, especially considering we're talking about Illinois with the insanity of their laws there. So, or maybe they didn't realize it, but it certainly, they had their cell phones. It wasn't too unclear that they could have been recording those cops. So I guess despite the police state, they weren't focusing on the little stuff, I suppose, and yes, so it could have been worse.
Right.
But
now, unfortunately, I think the worst instances of brutality I'm aware of that weekend, and I saw neither of them, where there was a van that drove through a crowd on Saturday night. There's some video of that that's been all over the internet.
And oh God, was it a police van or just some guy driving down the street?
Yes, a police van driving through a small crowd of people.
Wow.
And then on Sunday, of course, the crackdown on the Black Bloc March. I understand there may have been some people among the crowd that there have only been reports of people throwing plastic bottles. I've heard nothing about people throwing rocks or glass bottles, and usually you'd expect that there would even just be an agent provocateur in the crowd that would do that. But I still heard nothing about that. But they were definitely the police. 2 of the people that I came with had extensive injuries on them. One of the persons had a lot of baton bruises on his chest. Another person that came out on the trip with us who had taken a bus got 10 stitches in his head from a baton strike right to the top of his head.
Garrett, thanks for calling in, taking your time tonight to talk to us here at Free Talk Live. And, of course, folks can go and see some photos that you took from the event. I imagine you've got some video you're probably working on that will be up at some point.
photos and videos to come at Free Concord and Free Keene.
Perfect. freeconcord.org. Scarrett, Ian, thanks for the time tonight. Appreciate hearing from you. 855-450-FREE, the SACL CAI toll-free line. More coming up.